All right, so over the weekend in the Houston Rockets Denver Nuggets game, Kevin Porter and Christian Woods were after my bad. So reportedly, Kevin Porter and Christian Woods didn't like some things that came out of that John Lucas was saying about the team, and Kevin Porter left at halftime. Christian Woods to refuse to get to sub back into the game afterwards. Right now, nothing has been come out about what was said. I've seen one thing. It was alleged that John Lucas was mad about Christian Wood missing the mandatory COVID testing, and just in general, the whole team effort. He called out a couple different players. And I've been seeing this all day, and everybody having their thoughts on it. I've seen some people say Kevin Porter should get kicked out of the league because of this. And then you had what happened in Cleveland was last year's rookie season, and apparently people say this is something that Christian Wood's done, just having an attitude. It's something that's been in Christian Wood. Something he's had before. I haven't really heard anything about Christian Woods. And of course, there's the other side. We're saying, especially with Kevin Porter, he's a young player. Just help him work through it. He has, not necessarily he might not need to be punished. And I'm just one of the people, as a person who played ball and as a person who does basketball content, I'm not taking either side. Because, of course, you got people taking Kevin Porter's side and you got the people taking John Lucas' side. I don't think we should be taking either or side, first and foremost. We should be unbiased in this situation. But when you hear stuff like this, how does on a young team that's not really having a successful season, how does this what are your thoughts when you hear stuff like this, this kind of story?
Right, yeah. Like you said, to go back, it was said that Christian Wood, because I don't think he started this game, or he didn't.
He didn't start.
Yeah, so he was going through some type of disciplinary action for. I didn't know it was for missing a COVID test. I just knew it was something that he missed with the team.
It was reported.
Right, so that seems to be what happened, and from what I read, because I don't know who tweeted it first, but I know I saw it in Woj and Shams, and then there was another guy. They all tweeted it, and apparently something that Kevin Porter did in the first half, because I didn't watch this game, first of all, so I want to start there. Didn't watch this game, so don't know how it happened, but something happened in the first half that had Kevin Porter upset, I guess, and John Lucas, who's been an assistant coach in the NBA for a while, he's been coaching for a while. I guess they kind of had an exchange during the game. I haven't seen the video of it yet, but that's what I read. And then I guess during halftime, I think it also should be said that it was said that John Lucas, that is, was speaking out against everybody because lack of effort or whatever, but in particular to a few different players. But one of those players was Kevin Porter. He brought something up to him. They said it was the same thing, I guess, that had him upset in the first half. Mm-hmm. I guess kind of challenging him on it, I guess, and that's what led to their exchange. I don't know exactly what was said in particular with Christian Wood, other than, like you said earlier, he was already going through some disciplinary actions because of whatever obligation he missed. So only speculation, but it seems like maybe they were calling him out, kind of leading the younger guys or whatever. But I guess I went way off. But when you first see it, I went way off from your question. But when you first see it, you don't want to see. We already know Houston's not winning games, right. So you also don't want them to be building bad habits of not being able to be called out, right, or just the overall fighting. At least you don't want it to go to Jalen Green, who's in his first year. You don't want him to see dysfunction in his first year, mm-hmm, or whatever. So a coach calling out a player is normal. A player and a coach kind of going at it is normal. Right. Hey, you don't know what the hell you talking about. Hey, be quiet. You ain't out there. It happens, especially in the NBA's grown men. They're in the middle of a 7-game losing streak. People are frustrated. It happens. But I can't really say too many cases I've heard of. Oh yeah, he left at halftime. He had to go. So that just makes it a little. That's when the questions start coming into, well, what did he say? Mm-hmm. And unless he personally attacked him, calling him out his name or something like that, I don't really care what he said. The coach is gonna call you out, especially when y'all playing bad. So, to end it, this long spiel, you can't throw Kevin, and I'm not the biggest fan of Kevin Porter. I want to say it from on the basketball court. I don't know him personally. I don't like his game. I don't think he's that good. I think he's a solid player. I don't think he's as good as what I've been told that he is. I think Christian Wood is a really solid player, but I think even his profile's gotten a little bigger than because he was having an all-star type year before the injury last year, and some people thought he could make All-NBA, so egos and stuff like that
start to come up. For sure.
I'm not saying the Rockets should get rid of Kevin Porter. I never really knew Christian Wood was in their future because he's a little older than the younger players they got. But this isn't something where you just throw the player away or whatever, especially such a young player. And yes, Kevin Porter had to run in Cleveland, obviously, which is why people bring it up. But like two offenses, and maybe I don't know, but maybe he does have anger issues. He's been in the league 2 years, so he's 19, 20 years old. We ain't got to get into his background, how he grew up and all that. Right. He could just be going through stuff emotionally, plus he could be frustrated, 7-game losing streak, all that plays a part in it. Your coach is probably getting on you. Something went wrong there for everybody, right, including the coach. I don't even know what he said, but Lucas is an OG in the game. He has a lot of people's ears or whatever, right, but this is just not what you just don't want your younger, especially Jalen Green in particular. You don't want to be building these players around dysfunction. So that's just something that jump out to me when you hear all of this.
Not for sure. And with that being said, I'm John W.
It's Fresh X.
And it's the Hoopers Hour on Nothing But Net Radio, presented to you by Dash Radio. Just to stick with this just real quick, because that's one of those things you always harp on when it comes to young teams. Like, you don't want to build up a bad culture and bad habits, because it's hard to break out of that once a player's been in that type of situation for 4, 5, 6, 7 years of his career. And then when he does finally move on to, well, I guess what you could call to a more stable situation, sometimes they grow into it and develop in that, or sometimes they just never figure it out and never just become the player they can be. So yeah, you're right. This is like say, who knows what's happening in between to the game and before that, but it's a situation that Steven Silas has to get under control, like right now, and just get everybody back on the same page.
And especially like you say, just dealing with the dysfunction off the court, plus y'all are not winning on the court. Like, the winning streak didn't happen with the young guys on the court. Right, I mean, it happened when they were out. So, and you already shifted this whole rotation to where it's around them. You're not playing John Wall because of them. So you also don't want to build the bad ego habit of where they get to think, I can run this organization. A coach can't call me out, because who knows? I'm gonna just assume that he was talking basketball, because what I read was the exchange started basketball wise. Your coach got to be able to get on you when y'all playing bad, and I mean, you got to turn that into because they were losing by 20, but it's the NBA. You get hot, you come back, you go on the streak, you play inspired. So it's nothing but a learning situation, though, especially for such a young player in Kevin Porter. Christian Wood he's a young player, but he isn't a young player, so it's all speculation what I could be saying about him. But it just seems like they want more leadership out of him, because I mean, of their young players, he is the oldest that's been around some, so he would be one that you would expect a little more out of him, I would guess.
No, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Just like I said, just especially on an effort night basis, because that's all your coaches can. If nothing else, you can give effort. But just to move from that situation, the Lakers, well, LeBron James in general has been playing great basketball scenes. Come back, the Lakers kind of hanging there with them when they can. When they can't, they get beat badly. But they beat Portland the other night, who a lot of people just even stick on this effort. Just don't stick on the effort real quick. Say Portland didn't look like they was giving the effort of a team who was not necessarily desperate for wins, but needed some wins just to get their season rolling. And when you're like LeBron, I think he had 30, had a triple, that 30,
43 the other night.
43 in 29 minutes.
Yeah.
And when you play like LeBron, that's how you want to get the team back rolling. You see a team you can kind of take advantage of. I know we say that, I'm pretty sure we've said this like twice this season already, but do you think this is the game the Lakers can kind of go, and since you start getting some players back healthy, they can kind of go and get on a rhythm from here?
You will hope so. You will hope so, because we've seen how they have the toughest schedule. And I mean, I didn't learn much from the Lakers after that game because they really kind of did what you said. Like when LeBron, Melo, and Westbrook are on the court at the same time, that's when they get good results or whatever. LeBron had already been playing well. Like he had already been on a killer, like 8-9 game stretch.
Right. And
they were like 1-5, 1-6 in that stretch or whatever. So, I mean, beating Portland the way they did definitely helps because being able to just get a good top to bottom blowout win helps, and you are trying to get in rhythm and things like that, but they still got a lot of things to improve, and sometimes a win like that can mask that because you think, all right, we just snapped it on one game and we're better, but it's still things that they need to improve on. So you can't say a win doesn't help. It's just I know everyone has completely that one game. I saw a lot of people on NBA Twitter just kind of completely jump the other side, and it's like it's not fixed yet because they won one game. Looked like LeBron had been on a roll, so it didn't surprise me to see he had 40 because he was gearing up for that. He's been giving 30s back to back to back. I mean, he's second in scoring right now because of the run that he's been on.
Right.
So I don't think it fixed everything for the Lakers because some of the same stuff that I've been saying Westbrook do, that's what's been an issue for them. And I mean, the tight games is when they're going to need to be tight. They need Westbrook they need him to be better, period. Finishing his shots, cutting down on his turnovers. I like the consistency they're getting out of Malik Monk and Melo, but they got to keep it going. You know, Melo had a couple good games, and that loss the other night against Memphis, they could have really used a big shot from Melo, and he couldn't make a shot. But Melo's been one of the most consistent players all year. Just saying, they could have used a bucket from him. I think he went 2 for 11 or something like that. So, but picking up the win has to feel good for them to be able to. I mean, they pretty much dominated Portland.
Right, no, yeah, definitely, for surely. DeMar DeRozan is the first player in NBA history to hit back-to-back game-winning shots in back-to-back nights.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Didn't know that either. I seen somebody say something about Larry Bird, but he had, DeMar, both with buzzer beaters, and both of them 3-pointers, which we all know DeMar DeRozan doesn't necessarily want to attempt a lot of threes. One of them was off 1 foot, one pump fake in the corner. And if you look at the shots, they would be shots he would take if he was in the mid-range area. So they comfortable shots for him. They're just not in the area he would, he's most comfortable in. When you get wins like that, of course, everybody has DeMar at this point saying he's on a revenge tour. Fans really didn't appreciate him in San Antonio. But when you see the life that he's given Chicago this year, putting him in position to be a championship contender, let alone, be able to win the East, where did this kind of put DeMar DeRozan in you as far as maybe not even just MVP, maybe not even just MVP ladder, but just having a best season type of situation right now? Like, where do you put him as far as that? Because where his season's at right now?
Yeah, and like Stanley Gunn said, all game winners aren't made the same. His game winners were with Chicago losing. So they, it wasn't, we missed this, we're going to overtime. They kind of really needed those buckets. So those were 2 big shots from DeMar. I think when I look at his season, this is definitely probably the best season. It is the best season he's had. His second best season would be that last full year in Toronto. Like, he was averaging like 27 that year. It made me rethink the player. I think what I've gotten the most out of DeMar this year, because a lot of people looked at him as he kind of fell off in San Antonio. I never thought he fell off in San Antonio. I thought the team wasn't as better because he should have made the All-Star team a couple times there, but since the team wasn't firm in the playoffs, he didn't make it. I did kind of wonder, was he still... Well, I used to think James Harden was the top shooting guard, but after him, it was DeMar for me. So you did kind of wonder, did some of the other players catch up to him because they were in better situations? Devin Booker last year, Donovan Mitchell over the past few years. But what I've gotten out of this year is he really has taken his scoring prowess that he had in Toronto and he added with, because if you notice, his playmaking went up in San Antonio. He averaged career high in assists almost every year there, and now he's putting it together, and you're seeing the patience on offense, especially playing with another scorer like Zach that's averaging 25. And he's still just taking the playmaking because the ball is in his hands. So it's like you saying, the complete the completion of the player that he is trying to be. And that's what the years in San Antonio did for him. I mean, you could say it's a bit of a revenge tour, but I mean, it's always different when you're playing more for something. San Antonio wasn't necessarily playing for a championship. They were just trying to make the playoffs. But the Bulls put this team together kind of with contending in mind, whether it was this year or next year. You kind of have to say this year when you add Vooch, the older player, DeMar, the older player. Mm-hmm. You're thinking about contending. So his best season for sure by far. I was going to say it last week, and then shout out to Zach Knowledge from Off the Glass Pod. He beat me to it on Twitter for saying that he should be in the MVP conversation. And I honestly would have him up there. I mean, the Bulls at the top of the East right now because the Nets lost last night. They beat the Nets and they won. I mean, so they're at the top of the East right now, which I think some people predicted that they would be close to there, but they've looked the part also. They're not just winning games because people have been out and stuff like that. The Bulls have legit looked elite, and DeMar is a big part of that because Zach is having an all-star year. He's having a really good year. I mean, Zach had more points than DeMar last night, but it's like clear that DeMar is their best player. It's clear he their go-to player. It's clear he's the one that people trust the most.
Nah, yeah, for sure. And excuse me, DeMar just having a special season altogether. Especially if you look at his fourth quarter numbers. He's been basically 1-2 in every fourth quarter stat. Minutes, scoring, clutch scoring. And DeMar's kind of reaching that level. Like, he's been through those runs. He's been through those battles in the playoffs. If you guys have seen him on the Knucklehead podcast with Quivers and Darius Miles, he said, he couldn't only get around one player in the East, regardless of how people feel about it. That is true. And if they, he was still not even relatively young. He was still super young in Toronto while they was trying to get past LeBron. So maybe if they keep him, like he was saying, they make one or two more moves and they get past him. And I think DeMar's just bringing that knowledge with him to Chicago with how he's playing and how he's finishing games for him, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, that, and honestly, they trade him because they couldn't get around LeBron, which nobody... I mean, Kawhi's a better player than DeMar, so sure. This is what it is. But you trade him because you can't get around LeBron, and the year you have Kawhi, LeBron isn't there. I mean, it's different to put out Giannis and Joel Embiid to go to the finals than it is to put out LeBron to go to the finals. It's way different. So, and then even their team, even though Toronto, he was on some good teams in Toronto, that team was a little bit more complete with the emergence of Pascal and Fred VanVleet in the playoffs.
Right.
So Toronto was always right there, but you can't get past LeBron. And as soon as you get traded, LeBron leaves also. But like I said, he's still really young because DeMar is just crossing over 31 years old or whatever. So this has been 2-3 years ago when Toronto wins the championship. So it's been good to see him play, especially in those clutch moments. A lot of people easily try to give the next tab or the next Kobe or the players that played like Kobe to a lot of other players, and he kind of got overlooked when he's really right there. If you look at the patience in his game and stuff like that, and I'm not giving him the comparison completely. Kobe was a better player, he was a much better player, but Kobe was always an influence on DeMar's game. If you just know the history of it, and he even took to him. I mean, DeMar has spoken on how Kobe made sure that USC had Kobe's. He was the person that Kobe personally picked to continue to wear his shoes, like get the new shoes or whatever throughout the season. After he retired, he still kind of pushes the Kobe line or whatever. So you can see he's kind of putting together some of the things that Kobe taught him in the past now that he's back in position on a contending team, and he's trying to use them to the best of his ability. And I think that's going to help the Bulls because when you think about it too, just to end it, when the Bulls do get to that conference finals and you're playing the Bucks, you're playing the Nets, it does help that DeMar's been to 2 conference finals. So it's not like it's going to be his first time in the playoffs. He's been in the got playoff experience. Right, so he really just don't have finals experience. So that's really, I think, going to help when it comes time to it. He's been a number 1 seed before and a player leading the number 1 seed or whatever.
No, yeah, I definitely agree with that. So, and I think Chicago is one of them teams that they can keep it up. And I think they just have a good mix of players, especially defensively with players like Caruso and Lonzo Ball leading that perimeter defense. And then you throw in another scorer like Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, and then Kobe White coming off the bench leading that second unit and scoring. Chicago just has a really good mix to where I think they can have a chance to knock some teams off if they stay healthy and maybe make a push for the championship.
Yeah, for sure. And it would help if they still have Patrick Williams. I think the Bulls are going to try and find somebody in the buyout market to keep the team strong, but they got a good chance to make a run.
No, yeah, they definitely got a good chance. Speaking of teams that got a good chance to make a run, the Brooklyn Nets suffered I don't want to call it a complete meltdown because they were up 10 in the fourth quarter and let the Clippers come back, who's missing a lot of their key players, and come back and get that victory. Just looking at that fourth quarter of the game, especially after Pat Mills fouls out, Steve Nash was really dependent on a lot of two offensive player, three defensive player schemes out there running for the most part. James Johnson, DeAndre Bembry, Bruce Brown, KD, and James Harden, or Nick Claxton, depending on which one he was going with. In those situations, because you have Joe Harris who's out, and also Kyrie who will be back at some point. Do you see that's where kind of some of the flaws in Brooklyn's lineups or rotations kind of start to come in when you can take a player like, especially with the injuries, you can take a player like Pat Mills out the game. Now you don't necessarily have another offensive player out there.
Right, yeah. And KD said that they didn't deserve to win that game. He said they came in like they were supposed to win, as far as just thinking like the win was going to be given to them because Clippers had some people out and stuff like that, and they got lazy in the fourth quarter, which they were up as much as 15. We saw a couple careless turnovers by James Harden, but I do think when Patrick Mills when he fouled out, the Nets were still up about 8 points, 7, 8 points, and I think if Steve Nash goes with a better substitution there, that kind of puts the game away because James Harden was already having a pretty good game and he's gotten in better shape and has been playing better as he's gotten healthier. But also, if you notice, as Nick Claxton has gotten healthier also, because James is just also used to playing with that lob threat. I think Nick, he's played the most minutes that with COVID going on also, so people have been out, but he's played the most minutes that he's been playing recently, about hitting over 30 minutes here or there. He's been averaging, I think over the last 14 and like 7 or whatever, because James, and if you look at the last like 4 or 5 games, James has gotten triple doubles in 3 of them, I think. I mean, he's already at the top of the league in assists or whatever. But when he switched that lineup, he brought in Bruce Brown, and now, like you said, the lineup of Brown, Bembry, and James Johnson, James Johnson, black belt. They were out there with KD and James Harden, and it just didn't make sense. They do it for defensive purposes, so you could do the switch everything, but just to be so small and no shooting out there. While the Clippers had their, they got like Terrence Mann is on the court. He's a lengthy player. Coffee out there. He has length for him too. So they had some length to their perimeter players that were out there, and they just really gave them life with the bad mistakes that they were making. Bruce Brown came in and got a couple quick fouls that didn't help. But if you bring in Claxton or even LaMarcus Aldridge, I think they could have continued to put pressure on them on the inside, and they would have got some easy buckets. So that because they were doing that little wheel thing that they do where they move the ball, but it's so much more dangerous with Patrick Mills because he's more of a ball handler than Bembry, and he shoots better than Bembry and Bruce Brown. So both of them could. Bembry was one on the court. Him and Jalen Johnson could just focus on cutting. While now you got 3 players all focusing on cutting, and although KD and James Harden can shoot threes, if they're the one that's orchestrating everything, you don't need to have them as your best shooters on the court necessarily. So I just think if they would have went big, they could have continued to just put pressure on the inside, and then maybe KD could have focused on just shooting a little more. But teams get a little too happy with just playing small just because you can, just because theoretically it makes sense when sometimes it always don't, because Bembry and Bruce Brown, they're doing the same thing, so I don't really ever like when they on the court at the same time. Yeah. It doesn't ever work for me. I think Steve Nash should have went back with Claxton or at worst LaMarcus Aldridge to close that game.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. And I don't even know if LaMarcus Aldridge was available or not.
He was because he came back. He came back in to rebound when they went to free throws. So that's why when I first watched it, because I didn't watch it live, I watched it earlier just to see. I was like, well, could LA even come back in the game? And he brought him back in to rebound. I was like, Steve Nash definitely should be closing with them on the court.
Right. And I think just little stuff like that, because I think Steve Nash in this second year, I know a lot of people say it's easy with players like KD and James Harden on the court, but I think he's proven that he's going to be a good coach, especially with just some of the skills. Like, that's not a bad rotation, but it's a bad five when it's like you need at least one shooter out there. Like, if you can just say we're gonna get some good team defensive possession, it works. But Clippers was way too many times had 3-4 players in the paint because they know Bembry and Bruce Brown, or Bembry and James Johnson, or James Johnson and Bruce Brown is going to be in the paint together, and it's easy to clog it up. Now there is no spacing for layups or for Bruce Brown to roll and get that floater off, honestly.
And remember, the wheel worked better when they had Patrick Mills out there because there was such a shooting threat that you can't, like you just said, they clog the paint because we know Bembry, Jalen, and Jalen, Bembry, James, and Bruce, we know they're all diving. So, I mean, then in the end, we saw the game ending with James having to shoot that three that he didn't want to take in the corner or whatever. So just having another guard out there helps. I mean, like I said, you already down Joe. You don't have Kyrie Irving. So, while watching the game, you said that they could use some shooting, and I think that would help their team if they had another shooter.
He's just gonna be wide open every time off that wheel coming off one, either the James Harden or the KD, pass back. There's just gonna be somebody open right there.
Yep, especially in that corner kind of wing shot, because it was there for you. But you had somebody that wanted to take it.
That's the key, right?
Like, James wanted to kind of keep the wheel going because he's setting the pick and maybe he's going to dive. Bembry is straight diving and Bruce Brown is straight diving, so there's literally nobody to shoot. Because, like I said, KD and James are facilitating.
Right. I seen you tweet about it about Jaylen Brown, and I seen somebody else tweet about Anthony Edwards. But I think Jaylen Brown got up 36 shots in the last game.
Yeah, he should have had 30 points to 36 shots.
And I know your thing about that wasn't necessarily how many shots it took, but it was kind of how
Jason Tatum ain't play. I expect him to take 36 shots.
But it was kind of how unaggressive he was and getting to the basket and just shooting threes. And then, like I said, I don't remember who it was, but it was the Minnesota was playing Utah, and Anthony Edwards was attacking the whole first 3 quarters, and then when you get to the fourth quarter, he got to a point where he was selling for jump shots. And of course, a lot of people say it's the Steph Curry effect, to where you get good looks off those threes, and sometimes it is just a bunch of settled looks. When you see a player start to do, like I say, you expect Jaylen Brown, being the only offensive scoring threat on the team, to take that many shots. But when he starts settling, what's kind of the mindset you think a player is getting into at that point once they start settling for those long jump shots?
Right, when you start settling this, you trying to hit the big home run. It's a mix of the two things. Either you just really feel like the ref isn't calling fouls for you, or you just trying to hit the big home run shot to get y'all back, get all those points back at once. Because my problem wasn't that Jalen took 36 shots. It was that he was like 1 for 13 from 3, 2 for 13 for 3, but he was 3 for 5 from the free throw line. I would have liked him to be 2. Like, if he would have been 2 for 13 for 3, and then he's like 8 for 9 from the line, or 8 for 11 from the line, it's like, all right, it just ain't falling tonight. He's getting in the lane, because if you shot 11 free throws, they not calling everything, so you going to the paint.
Right.
So watching the game, I didn't watch the whole game, but I watched a good amount of the game, and he was getting in the lane whenever he wanted. He just at times does settle for those threes, because when they get down, it's like you're trying to get all those points back. And that's just my main issue with certain players. I think that it's still ways to get to the free throw line, and despite what the rules are, the best players always find ways to get to the free throw line, whether they calling stuff or not. You figure out how to get to the line to get points on the board, and then sometimes when they aren't falling, you put in 2 or 3 free throws, you see them go in all net, that gets your jump shot going a little bit. Maybe it opens your elbows and your arms or something that you can shoot a little better. So I just think sometimes players like that in particular, especially when you're so athletic, you want to see them go to the paint, especially in particular, like if you going 1 for 13, it's not finna just automatically start falling.
Right.
Get to the free throw line.
No, yeah, I definitely agree with that. And like I said, that's something. It's not even necessarily a new thing, but it's something you definitely see more with how much more the three is valuing. Like you say, just trying to get as many points back as you can in one possession, and just trying to bring some momentum to your team when the and one can do the same thing, or even just getting a layup and getting a stop. Honestly, because once you give up a three, how many long rebounds have we seen lead to a layup on the other side of the court from the other team, just because they're already out and running? So,
right,
like I said, it's a good shot. And it's a shot that, was definitely a shot that can change some momentum, but it's a shot that still has to be the right shot at some points. Like, just coming down and instead of attacking, especially when you're attacking all game, like Anthony Edwards in his case, and then you start settling, it's kind of like your legs done gave up on you and you just can't attack anymore at that point, or is it you really much. I'm just trying to make something happen and just get some momentum back on the team side.
And it's just too easy when you are having an off game, but the game is not within reach. A player just think, I'm going to just hit the big shot and that'll get us back in it, or I'm going to just miss it and we'll just call it a wrap. But sometimes you got to just chip away at the lead, and if you got to shoot 19 free throws, because if you go into the paint, they're gonna have to call it eventually if you're giving them a reason to call something.
Nah, yeah, definitely, surely. The New York Knicks are having a conundrum of a season this year. A lot of players who had good seasons for them last year, like Julius Randle and R.J. Barrett, some of the fans are kind of turning on. A lot of some of the players who they thought was going to be big key free agent pieces, fans kind of turned their back on, and they jump back on the bandwagon. Not necessarily the bandwagon, but jump back on their side. That's Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier. The Knicks are in a peculiar place just in general in basketball right now, because they are coming off a playoff run last year where they did get bounced in the first round, but they was expecting to build on that. Julius Randle was all NBA last year, finished top 5 in MVP voting. I think people saw R.J. Barrett taking another step this year offensively and defensively, and just a team being better because you had Mitchell Robinson back from injury. Like I say, you signed Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier. What do you think's been the legit problem with the Knicks this year, honestly?
Yeah, like last year, obviously, the pressure was way off, and I just think for the fact that people thought that they were going to be terrible and they weren't, just changed the perspective of everything. Because I don't think this team is that far off from last year. Right. The difference is, they say, I see a lot of fans think the spirit of the team is different, but the spirit of everybody is different because you got a home court playoff game last year, so everybody expected that to be the exact result this year. When the Knicks season was up and down last year also, they started off showing some promise, then they lost some games. They made the trade for Derrick Rose. He played a big role in their success the rest of the way, and then they ended the season with one of the weaker schedules, went on a run, and like they played hard, and Julius Randle was having a career year. Obviously, he was trying to find a new contract. Right. So a lot of things fell the way they wanted to go, but also because they're looking at it from a point of, hey, we just didn't want to be terrible. We just didn't want to play for the lottery. While some people, shout out to Edgar, you got people like Edgar who knows that this is year 2 of the rebuild of just trying to build a good culture.
Right.
But so a lot of people don't look at it from that perspective, that they really were kind of ahead of schedule or whatever. So it's New York. Like, we were home court last year. Julius Randle was an MVP candidate. Not that people saying they're a championship contender, but they think that they just should be way better this year, which I do think that they should be better, but I just don't think they're as terrible as some people try to. Like, I don't look at them as a championship contender. I think they're in the middle of the bunch of everybody in the East. So right. They're 17-20 right now, but they go on a 4 or 5 game winning streak, and they move back up or whatever. So you mix that with a couple of people, because the moves they made, they added some offense and gave up some defense, because no matter what you think about Everett Payton, he's a really good defender. He's been a really good defender. That's why he kept his spot in the lineup. I mean, Kemba got benched this year. Everett Payton, people hated him all year, but he didn't get benched at all last year. But then Reggie Bullock is more of a defensive-minded player, so you trade that for Evan Fournier. while he's already been a player, like we talked about him over the summer, how he's hot and cold. Like y'all gonna like him when he's good, but when he's going over 19 like he did for Boston in the playoffs, you ain't gonna want him on your team.
No,
like we spoke to that a lot in the offseason. And then Kemba, like we forget the fact that Kemba, I mean, he's coming off a knee. He came off that knee injury, and that hurt his season last year in Boston. He clearly hurt his value in getting traded and then getting basically bought out of his deal. And we've seen traces of that this year. So the Knicks have, I don't think the player, like, they clearly haven't been trying to play for the lottery. So when you're not playing for the lottery, that makes people think you're not necessarily rebuilding, but it's because they pick solid players that they like in a draft, and quickly, and in Obi, and then you put these other veterans around them, respectable people, because they were just trying to shift that whole toxic culture. Because at the end of the day, the Knicks' draw isn't going to necessarily just be in player development. The Knicks still want to attract a free agent. Hey, look what we did with Julius Randle. He finished top 5 in MVP. Imagine if that were you, a legit top 5 player, whoever this player is. Imagine that's you, a legit top 5 player in this position. Look how they love Julius Randle. He made All NBA. People thought he took a deal by only signing an extension instead of getting a new contract. They thought he was getting a deal. So if you come here and you do that, you're going to be in MVP conversations. You're going to be All NBA. You get the big contract or whatever. Their sale is still to get a big time free agent. So obviously, you want to see improvements from some of younger players. I'm not going to act like certain players haven't been disappointing. Julius Randle was in MVP conversations last year. RJ Barrett has had a worse season than he did last year. Everybody's shooting the 3 worst. But that's around the league, period. So I think the Knicks, They are at a point where you got to get realistic kind of with your destination or where you're trying to go. You got to keep trying to build that culture. But if they want to make the playoffs this year, I do think it's a few changes they're going to need to make, and they just got to play harder on defense.
No, yeah, and just before we switch from the Knicks, like you said, they were better defensively. I think they traded some defense for offense this year, signing Evan Fournier and Kemba Walker. Do you think that's kind of, I don't think I've seen anybody else talk about it. Maybe some Knicks people have talked about it. But do you think those signs have kind of disrupted what Julius Randle and RJ Barrett was building on last year offensively?
Yeah, in particular because Evan Fournier and Kemba are going to get up their shots, whether they're having a good year or not. They're just people because at the end of the day, Evan Fournier will give you that over 19 like he did for Boston in the playoffs. But then he'll have them nights where he goes 10 for 17 or something. He give 25, 30 points. And you like, Evan Fournier looks like one of the top 10 shooting guards in the NBA. Kemba, like, we all know Kemba and respect the origin that's been him since Connecticut. And, I mean, look at him. He started off the season rocky. He doesn't play for a couple weeks. They put him in because they need him, and he wins Player of the Week and stuff like that. So those players naturally take the ball out of the other players' hands. But I think this was a year for them to get more efficient. I mean, just because you get less shots, you also got to look at the fact that their shooting percentages is down. So if your shooting percentages goes up, I mean, that changes. You getting less shots. I mean, that's what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to get less shots, and you're supposed to start knocking down the shots that you're getting.
No, yeah, I definitely agree with that. They could, like, say, because I think that's been the big thing, especially with RJ. Like, his percentages are down a lot this year, to where it's like he's just not making shots, even if he is getting those shots. But some changes had to be expected, and I think at some point, everybody's gonna have to grow on those changes this year if they want to have a successful season and get back to the playoffs. Another team that's looking like they're kind of teetering on that as well, not necessarily missing the playoffs, but not having that same position as last year, and that's the Atlanta Hawks, who every time they kind of catch a rhythm, then they get out of the rhythm with some bad losses. Like it'll be some good wins, then some bad losses, then some okay wins and some really bad losses. I know once again they are going through some injuries in this year, especially, and then you pair that with the players missing time and health and safety protocols. A lot of people in NBA Twitter, especially for just the Hawks, think that some of their games should have been canceled over the past couple of days. But what do you think it is that's the difference between the Hawks from this year and the Hawks from last year?
Yeah, the Hogs, they definitely did have been going through the health and safety protocol issue. The Hogs had distinguished having the largest roster in NBA history because of all the COVID players that we've had to sign in Atlanta. But on top of that, the Hawks just took a step back because they came in just feeling themselves too much. And anybody look at it any other way, just not being realistic. Like, the defense was worse this year. The offense started off slow. And they just came in just smelling themselves because they put out the number 1 seed in Philly. And then you push Milwaukee to 6 games. And when Trey gets hurt after, game 2? Yeah, I think he got hurt. People picked the Hawks to finish at the top of the East just because they're young. They're gonna run off some wins during the regular season. People thought they would care more, but they came in here thinking, "Oh, we've already made it to the conference finals, so who cares about the regular season?" And they kind of reverted just to some old bad habits. On top of just dealing with the continuity of having players in, I mean, I have been a big fan of DeAndre Hunter, but at the end of the day, he can't stay on the court. So that just kind of is what it is. He was hurt last year. He's hurt right now. He always seems to be hurt. You've had other players that's been up and down. Like, some nights Cam looks like he should be a starter, but Cam started off the season really well, and then he went through stretches where he didn't play well either. So you need the consistency. Trey has the ability to put up big numbers night after night, but sometimes he falls in love with just putting up those big numbers, and his teammates gets forgotten, which is hard to say, which is crazy to say about a guy. Yeah, he's averaging 8 assists, right. But Trey forgets to get everybody shot sometimes. So Nate McMillan was the darling of last year, and now some people have wondered are they toning him out and stuff like that, kind of like what they did with Lloyd Pierce. So, right. And then, like you just said, just to bring it back to the health and safety protocols, it doesn't help to have those people out, because now you have to depend on the G League players a little more, with shout out to them for getting the opportunity to play in the league. But obviously you get thrown into certain situations and you're playing big minutes when you weren't even practicing with this team last year. That's, no matter how good you are, that just doesn't work all the time. So the Hawks, I think, are gonna decide to make a move to shift some of their younger players. The only thing is if the right players become available, because before it was talks of players like Bradley Beal and things like that, but it's like, are some of those players still available? I think they're gonna make a move that doesn't involve Trey. I don't think it's gonna involve John Collins, but I don't know who's gonna be available yet, so I'm just completely speculating. But right. I think they're gonna make a move to bring a more, established name. Not saying superstar player, but established name player, somebody that people know, to try to keep moving the team forward.
All right, no, for sure, and I think it's also a possibility, because at some point you just have to try to improve the team, and I guess to your point with the Nate McMillan thing, it is all possible, because at this point, Nate McMillan's probably harping on the same thing over and over to them right now. So this could be a point of the season where, after some tough losses, they kind of probably have. I'm not saying this is what has happened actually, but they probably have tuned out some of the messages he's giving them, because it's probably the same thing over and over again.
Right.
His effort, defense, like, just get back, open shots. Like, eventually, as a young team, you will tune some of that stuff out because you just don't want to hear it. But I think they will try to shake up the roster. And if you've seen some of the Hawks fans on NBA Twitter, they're not going to like that, because it's going to be some players who they don't want to move. And if they don't want this year to be a wash of a season where they still compete, Cam Reddish might be one of those players who they might just have to move. And if it's not, because if they don't move them, then next year you move Bogey or Gallinari, because their contracts aren't guaranteed, and now you free up some roster space like that to make the team better. But if they're trying this year, Cam is probably going to be involved in some of that. Do you think it would, like, say, for who, if it's the right person, of course, but do you think right now is the time to be maybe trading Cam if he's your best trade option, your best trade piece, I should say?
I would trade Cam, or I would move him in the starting lineup. I said that for a minute anyway. I think it's now on. You get to a point where it's on Cam to be consistent and live up to the potential that everybody has put on him and that he's put on himself. And it's now time for the Hawks to also can't baby him forever. We're gonna bring him off the bench and do this and that. If Cam and Trey is the backcourt of the future, it's time to start. Especially considering you did make that push in the playoff last year, it's time to see what you can really get out of it. And I mean, Cam's a better defender than Bogdanovich, and I think he brings a little bit more as a playmaker than him anyway, so it theoretically should make your team better. So I think the hold-up always came from who they believing in more, Cam or Kevin as their starter.
Right.
But obviously you paid Kevin Porter, but I mean he didn't get paid a crazy amount or whatever. I would be more open now to trading DeAndre Hunter, who I've wanted to hold on to over the past few years. But if he can't stay healthy, he can't stay healthy. And if he blossoms somewhere else, it just is what it is. But it is kind of close to time for them to make a move to show that they're serious about trying to win. And I mean, because I don't think it's a loss of a season if the Hawks make the conference finals again.
Right.
Because, I mean, them making it last year was an accomplishment. But next year, people will be kind of expecting them to make that conference final. So I think you got to keep the players focused on that and taking the regular season serious. And sometimes a little shake-up might help that out. And I ended with, like, everybody. It's cool to say, remember at the beginning of the year that people say that the Hawks, they're deep and they got the star lineup on the bench.
Right.
That sounds good, but those teams don't typically win the championship. Like in the playoffs, your rotations are shorter. Even like people always try to go to the Warriors. Remember the strength and numbers? They were still playing 8. Who that 8th person was might swap from night to night, but they were playing their starting lineup, and then on the bench, they brought in Sean Livingston. Then tonight, it might be Festus Ezeli and Spates, or we're going to go with Barbosa, and they weren't playing consistently 10-man. That don't work in the playoffs.
And those are usually young teams, too, anyway, where you can say, they can go 2-3 deep at one position. Those are usually young teams that's trying to figure out who is going to be our 8-9-man rotation, honestly.
Right, so I think the Hawks, if they're serious about competing for a championship in the next couple of years, you either like really need players to step up, or maybe you just got to start looking at trying to shake it up.
No, for sure. The Charlotte Hornets, who were playing team last year, one of the more exciting teams to watch last year, kind of came into this year with some playoff expectations. I don't know if how high they were expecting to finish this year, but I know a lot of people, just with how LaMelo Ball played last year and the development of Miles Bridges, thought that they could make the playoffs. Do you think Charlotte's kind of having a disappointing season this year? They haven't really been too consistent, especially from the start of the season, where they've been able to string together, 4 or 5 wins in a row and kind of maintain that good playoff position.
It's funny. I don't think Charlotte's having a disappointing season because they're not having a bad season.
No,
they're in the playoffs. They're over 500. But I don't think they've gotten better, honestly. Like, I know earlier in the year, Miles Bridges looked really good, and he was having his most improved type season to start off. Right, like, he was averaging like 25 or something earlier. I think he's probably at 18, 19 now. Which is still good, but he clearly came more down to earth. Like, through LaMelo's first 80 games of his career, he's averaged, like, LaMelo's 20 and like 7 or whatever. Terry Rozier has been good. They've all been solid, but it just seems like something is missing from Charlotte. But I guess, these first couple of years, the plan was to just build good habits because we didn't even expect Charlotte to be good at all last year. And they're a LaMelo injury away from probably having a better chance at making the playoffs.
Right.
So I don't think they're having a disappointing season necessarily. I just don't think... I expected them to be a little better this year than they are, though.
No, I think a lot of people did. Like I say, it's not that they're having a bad season or a disappointing season. I just think we saw a little more coming from this team this year, especially because you got to get a full Gordon Hayward, LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges, Terry Rozier off season. They kind of upgraded the center position a little bit, but they can still upgrade it right there. But I think they are missing something. I think it's a wing. I think it's like I say, Miles Bridges is good right there for them at that wing scoring position. Bringing Kelly Oubre brought in more shooting and athleticism. Yeah. But I really think they're missing that go-to wing player who you can give the ball to at any moment and he can get a bucket for himself. And while Miles Bridges has been good, I don't think Miles Bridges is that type of player. Or not that type of player yet, because he could develop into that.
And it's been nice to see, like, Kelly Oubre, he's come back to life this year after having a disappointing year in Golden State last year. He's averaging almost 17 a game. Like I said, Gordon Hayward, he's averaging almost 17 a game, just a consistent player. Gordon's a really good player to watch.
Right.
But that wing player probably would make them... That probably would make them or solidify big because like PJ Washington, he's okay. He hasn't gotten that much better this year. He's averaging like 10 a game. So a certified big might could help what they're doing also. So it's still some growing to do there.
Oh, that makes sense. A big. I know one of those big they should be looking at is Miles Turner, who is definitely on the trade.
Miles Turner will help them.
Indiana. Before we get out of here,
Miles Turner will definitely help them. Like that's for sure a big man, and you can play Miles at the 4, Miles Bridges at the 4. Because I like Gordon Hayward on the team. I like what Miles Bridges is doing this year. Like you say, I like LaMelo. That center will help them a lot.
No, for sure. I've been seeing a push from it, but from his teammates most. But of course, Golden State fans have also pushed it. Do you think Andrew Wiggins made the All-Star game this year?
With them being as good as they are, he has a chance. But I don't think so. Because his statistics are pretty good. What is he on the year? About 17, 18 a game.
Yeah, shooting 43% from 3.
So
and number one, I think he can get just for the fact they are number one in the West, and I think that coaches are gonna respect that.
Honestly. He's 19 a game, almost 20 a game. So 19 a game. He's legit gonna get some All NBA defense talk this year. So and those are like golden for coaches' picks.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a chance, but. And then it also helps that a couple of stars are having down years. So, if there's any time to give a first timer a chance, it'd be this year. And that'd be a hell of a redemption for Andrew Wiggins for this year to be his first All-Star year. And it'd kind of not be in the way that people thought that it was gonna be. It's out of efficiency and good defense, opposed to him being a big time scorer or whatever. So. I think he's going after looking at it again because I thought he was averaging about 17. I think averaging 19 gets him a little bit better of a conversation, especially because Mike Conley got a replacement last year, and I don't think he necessarily deserved to make it, but he had good shooting percentages. We know that he was a good defender. I don't know if he made all defense last year, but his defensive numbers are always there, and then. The fact that Utah were first and had been first all year helped Mike Conley's argument. So it's like, go ahead and give him his first one. So, this would be a good opportunity for Andrew Wiggins to get his first one.
But other than that, you got anything else?
No, other than that, nope. That's pretty much it. I think that's all I got. Other than that, just always appreciate all the listeners. Shout out to the Off the Ball Network. Shout out to the Nothing But Net channel through the Dash Radio app. Of course, we're here every Monday at 3 p.m. Shout out to the Halftime app every Wednesday. We're going to be there 6 p.m. for the Hoopers Room. We're having afternoon sessions every Wednesday, so go to our YouTube page, the Hoopers. Just search the Hoopers on YouTube, the Twitter page at Hoopers Pod. And on the Off the Ball Network's Facebook page for the 12 o'clock afternoon Hooper session.
All right, with that being said, I'm John Davey.
For sure.
And this is the Hoopers Hour on Nothing But Net Radio, presented to you by Dash Radio.